everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ace on Music After Hours. I'm joined, as always, by my faithful producer, Mark, and my friend and assistant, Sean. So, guys, we had a great show today talking about getting your bands on tour, and we slipped into a little bit of a conversation about riders. Tour riders, that is. So I thought it would be fun to talk about maybe some of the weirdest things we've heard about bands adding to their tour rider. I mean, we touched on the brown M&Ms thing in the main broadcast that Van Halen did and why they did it. But I have seen some unusual things on tour riders. Like back in the early 2000s, I worked with Guns N' Roses and was doing merchandise for them. And I remember the first show we did in an arena in Vancouver, where there was a riot actually, but I remember Del James, my friend who's like their production manager, taking me from dressing room to dressing room, and there was 3 dressing rooms. Axl had his own, and then the rest of the guys were split between 2 others. And in the dressing rooms, besides your normal waters and food deli trays and all that crap, on one table there was, I swear to you, about a dozen porno mags, and they were like not Penthouse Playboy kind of thing. I mean those ones that you have to go into the real seedy bookstores to find. Yeah. And I went, "What's this all about?" And he said, "Well, we have kind of a contest that we run on the road with the promoters, and there's a clause in our rider that says you need a dozen porno mags. The dirtier, the better." And then they go through the whole tour until they find what they consider to be the most vile, thing, and it's kind of like the tour winner. Nice. But as strange as that is not the strangest thing that I saw in those dressing rooms. And this was at a time when the guitarist Buckethead was playing for them. Now, if you know anything about Buckethead, he's a strange dude to begin with. Okay, his real name's Brian. He's a super nice guy, but. Like, for example, when he was recording with Guns N' Roses in the studio, he had them build him a chicken coop in the studio that he would sit in to play his guitars, because that's, don't even get me started. But anyway, weird dude. So I went into the dressing room that he shared with a couple of the other guys, and there was all the normal stuff that you saw in the other dressing rooms, the bottles of water, the deli trays, the blah, blah, blah. And then the one thing they set up for him, for Buckethead, and that is a 4x8 table that was literally just covered in his toys. Whether it be, a disembodied hand that was on a remote control that would crawl across the table, or if it was his action figures or whatever, and you just go, woo! How strange. Have you ever heard of any really weird things on tour riders?
Well, I will say in defense of, I think, like we said again in the earlier piece, a lot of this is power.
Yes.
It's stuff you could do yourself that you don't need to. But and I know about, we all know about Eminem's koi pond, and having to paint. It was a J-Lo, I think, that he had to paint the entire green room a certain color of whatever, certain hue of pink or something. But one of the things I found to be almost offensive and yet completely understandable was Katy Perry's requirement that the driver not talk to her.
Right.
And I know we're having some fun with this, but I will say, being on the road is hard. Mm-hmm. And everybody's talking to you, and the one time you get a little bit of peace, and I know Katie took a lot of shit for this, for the mute driver. The driver was not allowed to start a conversation with her. But it's sort of funny, but it's almost like a plane passenger saying, "I would like a seat where the other person doesn't talk to me." It didn't seem unreasonable to me that it was, of all the crazy and the fancy bottles of whiskey that had to be a certain brand in a certain year, and they had to send somebody out on a 1 week, the one that she gets the peace and quiet to and from the hotel seemed to make the most sense.
Was there another artist that you encountered that was like that? Was it Neil Diamond? Did you look at him?
Well, it wasn't. I don't know if it was part of the rider, but
Michael Jackson.
Neil Diamond was playing at the Universal Amphitheater, and they actually when it was time for him to go to stage through the dressing room, he has to go through the VIP area. They actually built this kind of tarp system that he could walk through without anybody looking at him, and then we all had to turn our backs so that nobody would look at him as he walked. But I don't know if that was on the rider. But Mark, what you said was very accurate. And, but sometimes the riders, they are a power play, but they're a power play in order to ensure that something that's very important to the artist is adhered to by the venue. And let me explain what I mean by that. Let's take the example of Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney, very active, vocal, animal rights, anti-meat eating guy, doesn't want animals to be killed and all that. So in his rider, it says very clearly that he doesn't want any furniture in his dressing rooms that are made from animals or animal byproducts. He doesn't want meat. He doesn't want any of that stuff backstage, because that's how he's decided to live his life. And so he makes it clear to the venue, because he doesn't want to go in and sit on a leather couch knowing that an animal gave its life for that. So the riders are important for that as well. Sometimes it's just, we talked in the main episode about how you're away from home and you're in a different environment every day. And there's some things that just give you peace of mind, happiness, whatever. Like I remember when we toured with Motorhead, Lemmy would always ask for half a dozen of those little chocolate Kinder eggs, those ones that have the toy on the inside. And after a few days of watching this, I would always go into the dressing room and I would see a pile of the chocolate just all piled up in the corner. And I was like, well, was the chocolate not good or something? He says, no, I don't want them for the chocolate. I want them for the toys. And there would be rows of little toys from the Kinder Surprise eggs. And I remember Adam telling me, my business partner who was tour managing him at the time, that he got a desperate call from a promoter once saying, we've looked everywhere. There just are no Kinder eggs in this area. And he said, look, do you have like a 99-cent store near you? And they said, yeah. They said, go in there, buy a bag of those like little plastic army men or something like that for 99 cents and leave that in his dressing room, because all he wants is the toys out of the chocolate anyway. So.
Because there's different aspects of the rider, going back to what you said about Paul McCartney and the food.
Mm-hmm.
He also, on his tour, I forget, it was after the 9/11 or one of the bombings that happened, he requested on his rider at every show they had 2 bomb-sniffing dogs.
Yeah.
And if he didn't get those, he would not play.
Yeah, but and the promoter is fine with that. I mean, some of the riders get out of control. I mean, I was at the International Live Music Conference, which I go to in England every year, and there was a seminar there on tour riders, and they were giving examples of some of the biggest ones, and they were talking about it was a Michael Jackson tour that they were doing, and they showed the rider for that, and no joke that on any given show they were spending $500,000 to fulfill the rider. No, it was things like needs to have a Learjet on the runway 24/7 ready to fly, needs to have, I mean, his touring company is like 200 and some odd people, so there's a lot of demands there. But there was things on there, like when I toured with Guns N' Roses, I mean, they carried their own gym, and it got set up every day in there and everything, I don't think I ever saw anybody use it.
Stories that Queen actually used to have a mud wrestling ring and so they can have entertainment before each show. It's a true story.
Well, I know that Paul Stanley said that in the 70s, once after a Kiss show, they demanded to have an actual pool brought in that everybody could use. But again, I said it in the main broadcast, is that promoters don't care. I mean, if you're a band that's filling an arena and you want a pool backstage that's going to cost them $50,000 to rent and set up or whatever, they're happy to take that $50,000 out of your fee in order to give you your pool, so.
Yep. But Justin Bieber gets a coffin back there.
A coffin?
Yeah, an Indian coffin or a yoga coffin or something like that. So, some people get a pool.
Deal with the coffin.
I don't know. Anyway, well, I want to thank Mark and Sean for joining me in this interesting discussion about weird things on riders. And I want to thank all of you out there for your continued support. We really appreciate it. Use the Patreon app to leave us comments, ask us questions, whatever. If you prefer to use email, you can send us email at acetalksmusic@gmail.com. And thanks again for your continued support. Until next time, take care of yourself.